Well, flood risk and flood preparedness have been on some islanders' minds after seeing the devastating flash flooding in Nova Scotia. Several years ago, the Intact Centre on Climate Adaptation at the University of Waterloo rated each province in terms of flood preparedness. PEI received the best grade in the Atlantic region, a B- in that 2020 report. Work has continued since. The province released coastal flooding risk maps a couple of years ago. Also launched an online workshop for homeowners. Joanna Eyquem is Managing Director of Climate Resilient Infrastructure for the Centre. She has helped with a number of projects, both with the province and the city of Charlottetown. Good morning, Joanna.
Good morning.
We're checking in on this, of course, because of the extreme flooding that was seen in Nova Scotia recently and some discussion around preparedness for that. In terms of where PEI is at versus, say, Nova Scotia, where do you think we are as a province?
Well, I think PEI has really stepped up awareness and kind of understanding of coastal flooding in particular, which is obviously a key issue for the province. But they've also stepped up measures to improve flood literacy around all types of flooding. So obviously there's coastal flooding, there's also river flooding and this intense rainfall flooding that we're also seeing more commonly with climate change, particularly in urban areas. So the province has developed a course called Protecting PEI Homes from Flooding and Erosion, which is freely available online. And the aim through that course was to try and raise awareness of the risks, but also of the solutions that individuals can also put in place and to help them, be aware of what the government is also doing.
And are there easy ways to protect against flooding?
So for intense rainfall flooding, I think the good news is there are some simple solutions that can make a difference. So one of those is backwater valves, for example, that stop sewage coming back up through the sewage system through the toilet. There's things like sump pumps as well to help kind of get water out of basements. But also very, very simple things like, if you have a basement, not storing valuables or making sure they're off the ground so that if your basement does flood, then you don't have a lot of damage. But these are all kind of simple solutions. It doesn't solve the greater problem, but it can reduce damages in your own home.
There certainly has been lots of discussion about places that are higher risk than others. And so is it important knowing where those high risk areas are?
Yeah, and I think particularly, the work that PEI have been doing on coastal flooding is really key for that, because obviously a lot of these high-risk areas are coastal or river floodplains, so where we're getting kind of major floods, and we can kind of predict where they are going to be. The intense rainfall, where we're getting these kind of cloud burst events, a lot of rain coming down at once, they're less predictable in terms of where they're going to fall next. We've had them in Nova Scotia, but also in Ottawa last week. So I think, this is more it is looking at our urban drainage, looking at kind of sewerage systems, but also how we're working nature into our urban development to act as a sponge to soak up that water. A lot of cities are trying to, make sponge cities basically so that we can absorb some of that water. In urban areas, our drainage systems, you want to have a strategic view of your drainage system. And I think, viewing nature as infrastructure, that's something that we've seen very much more increasing in Canada, is seeing kind of our systems of, swales, woodlots, rivers, wetlands as really infrastructure that is providing services to us and knowing how that works as well as our built infrastructure.
And how do you make a sponge community, one that is able to absorb up the water better than others?
Well, I think one key thing is knowing what you have already. So we're seeing over 120 local governments across Canada now, including Charlottetown, actually, in PEI, are doing natural asset inventories. So basically, they know what natural assets that they have and how they work and what services they're providing to the city. So I think that is a key step to knowing what natural infrastructure we have, because, we do asset management for built assets, but it's not routine yet to include natural assets in those. But in the same way as built assets are helping drain our water and store it and clean it, So our natural assets are doing the same thing.
Joanna Eyquem is the Managing Director of Climate Resilient Infrastructure with the Intact Centre for Climate Adaptation at the University of Waterloo. Laura brings us the second part of this conversation with Joanna tomorrow. What to do with places that repeatedly flood, including coastal areas, and how in the U.S. property buyers can see the risks online, not just from flooding, but also from wildfire, from heat, and from wind as well. So part 2 of that conversation coming up tomorrow here on Island Morning. For now, it's 24 minutes after 6.